a sound or you'll wake them in the deepest part of the ancient forest. The flickering candlelight illuminates the faded pages of a story. Hedgehog still sits and tells the stories that people dare not tell before.
The Last Light of Samhain. In the forgotten hamlet of Blackwater Mend, nestled in a valley where the mist never truly lifted, Halloween was not a night of costumed merriment and sweet treats. It was the night of the thin veil, a solemn, fearful vigil. They called it Samhain, its true name a whisper on the chill wind, a relic of an older, grimmer world. For the people of Blackwater Mend knew a truth that the wider world had chosen to forget. On this one night, the barrier between the living and the dead grew frail as gossamer, and the dead did not always come in peace. The legend was as much a part of the village as the crooked, half-timbered houses and the ever-present squelch of mud underfoot. 1,000 years ago, a powerful and cruel sorcerer, Morwen the Vile, had been betrayed and slain by the very villagers whose ancestors he had once ruled with a fist of iron. With his dying breath, he did not curse them with plague or famine. He cursed them with remembrance. He vowed that every Samhain, when the veil was at its thinnest, his spirit would not pass on to the afterlife. Instead, it would anchor itself to the mortal realm, and he would have the chance to walk again. But a spirit is a formless thing, a wisp of malevolent intent. To truly return, to wield flesh and blood power once more, Morwen needed a vessel. He needed a living soul to willingly invite him in, to open a door that the veil had closed. For centuries, the villagers had kept the ritual. As dusk fell on Samhain, every household would extinguish their hearths and lanterns. They would carve grim-faced turnips, and later, pumpkins, with twisting, unsettling sigils, not smiling faces, and place them on their doorsteps. These were the warding lights, filled with a special, slow-burning candle made from sacred tallow and blessed herbs. Their purpose was not to welcome, but to warn. The flickering, eerie glow created a boundary, a symbolic fire that the dead, particularly a spirit as vengeful as Morwen's, could not cross. So long as the last light of Samhain, the final warding candle in the village, remained burning, Morwen was trapped in the spectral winds, howling his frustration into the night. But should the last light go out before the first ray of dawn touched the crooked spire of the village church, the veil would tear. Morwen's spirit would be free to seek a vessel, and his resurrection would begin. This year, the weight of the ritual fell heavily. The village elder, Alaric, who had always overseen the preparation of the sacred tallow, had died in the spring. The responsibility passed to his granddaughter, Elara, a girl of 17 with eyes the color of a winter sky and a heart scarred by loss. She was diligent and loved her village, but she was also modern, her head filled with books from the world beyond the valley, books that scoffed at superstition. In her heart, a small, rebellious seed of doubt had taken root. Was this all just a pageant of fear? A story to keep children indoors? The atmosphere in Blackwater Mend on the day of Samhain was thick with a dread that Elara found herself resenting. She moved through her tasks in the small, stone-flagged workshop, grinding the herbs, rendering the tallow, her movements precise but her mind elsewhere. She missed her grandfather terribly. His faith in the old ways had been absolute, unshakable. Hers was a frayed rope. The candle must be perfect, Elara, wheezed Mrs. Higbee, the oldest woman in the village, her back bent like a gnarled tree root. She had placed a grizzled turnip, intricately carved with the twisting eye sigil, on Elara's workbench. My hands are no good for the carving anymore. You must make the light that will guard my home. Elara looked at the ugly, snarling root vegetable. It seemed so primitive, so foolish. Wouldn't a good, strong lock serve better, Mrs. Higbee? She asked, trying to keep the impatience from her voice. The old woman's eyes, milky with cataracts, seemed to see right through her. Locks keep out men, child. The light keeps out what was never a man to begin with. Your grandfather understood. See that you do, before the sun sets. As the afternoon wore on, a thick, unnatural fog began to coil through the streets of Blackwater Mend, a fog that smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. It was early, too early. A prickle of unease, the first genuine one, ran down Elara's spine. She finished the candles, pouring the warm, herb-scented tallow into the molds. The final and most important candle, the one that would burn on the village altar in the square, the last light itself, she made with extra care, if only to silence the nagging voice of her grandfather's memory. Dusk fell, swallowing the grey day whole. One by one, the lights in the village winked out, hearth-fires were doused, lamps were extinguished, doors were bolted, and shutters were fastened tight. The only illumination came from the pumpkins and turnips on the doorsteps, their sigils glowing with a sickly, orange light, pushing back against the oppressive fog. The village square, usually a bustling heart, was empty save for the stone altar upon which Elara now placed the thick, pillar-like last light candle. She struck a match, her hand trembling slightly in the cold. The flame caught, steady and strong. It was done. She hurried home, the silence pressing in on her. It was a silence that felt watched. Inside her small cottage, she bolted the door and looked through the window. The view was a nightmare panorama. The warding lights glimmered like a swarm of malevolent fireflies in the roiling fog, each one a tiny bastion against the dark. And in the center of the square, the last light burned, a lone, brave sentinel. For hours, nothing happened. The wind moaned through the cracks in the shutters. The old clock in the hall ticked its slow, ponderous rhythm. Elara tried to read, but the words blurred before her eyes. The seed of doubt grew. Was everyone huddled in the dark, terrified of a story? Was her grandfather's life's work, and now hers, just the perpetuation of a meaningless fear? Then, the church bell tolled once, a single, mournful note that should not have sounded until dawn. It was midnight. A change came over the fog. It thickened, coalescing into shapes. Faint, shimmering forms began to appear at the edges of the village, where the forest met the fields. They were the common dead, the beloved ancestors, the lost children. They drifted silently, their faces pale and sad, drawn back to the places they had loved. They meant no harm. They were mere echoes. Elara saw a faint shimmer that looked like her grandfather, standing by the old well, and her heart ached. This, she thought, was perhaps real. This gentle haunting she could believe in. But then he came. A presence manifested in the square, a vortex of darkness that made the other spirits seem like candle flames before a bonfire. It was a figure woven from shadow and hatred, tall and gaunt, wearing the phantom trappings of a sorcerer's robe. Morwen. He had no clear face, only 2 points of smoldering red light where eyes should be. The air around him grew deathly cold. Frost crackled over the cobblestones, radiating out from his form. Elara watched, her breath catching in her throat. The stories were true. All of them. Morwen's spectral head turned, those burning coals sweeping across the village, assessing the warding lights. He floated towards a cottage, the blacksmith's. As he approached the pumpkin on the doorstep, its light flared, brighter and more violent than before. A symbol carved into its surface glowed with a fierce, white energy. Morwen recoiled with a hiss that seemed to scrape directly against Elara's soul. He was testing the wards. He moved from house to house, a predator circling a herd of sleeping prey. At each door, the same thing happened. The warding light held him at bay. The villagers, hidden in their darkened homes, would be feeling the unnatural cold, hearing the faint, angry hiss. Their faith, their fear, was the power in the candles, and Elara's work had given that power form. A grim satisfaction settled over her. The doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. She had been wrong. The ritual was not foolishness, it was survival. For hours, the stalemate held. Morwen paced the perimeter of the square, a caged wolf. The dead ancestors watched, silent and helpless. The last light on the altar burned steadily, its flame a beacon of defiance. Then, the wind picked up. It was a gust born not of nature, but of malice. It howled through the square, a focused gale aimed directly at the village altar. The flame of the last light candle gutted violently, shrinking to a desperate blue flicker. Elara's blood ran cold. It was going to go out. Without thinking, she grabbed her shawl and unbolted her door. The cold that hit her was a physical blow, sucking the air from her lungs. She stumbled out into the street, the fog clinging to her like a shroud. Elara, no. A voice whispered. It was the shimmering form of her grandfather. Get back inside. He cannot cross the threshold, but you are exposed. The light, she cried, her words misting in the frigid air. It's going out. She ran towards the square, her feet slipping on the frost-slick cobbles. The presence of Morwen turned towards her, and she felt a wave of pure, undiluted hatred so potent it made her stagger. The red eyes fixed on her, and for the first time, she heard his voice, not in her ears, but in her mind. It was the sound of grinding stones and crumbling tombs. Flesh, and blood, and will. A vessel, so eager, to come to me. I am not your vessel, she shouted, pushing forward. The wind redoubled its efforts, howling with a voice of its own. The flame of the last light was now a mere spark, clinging to the wick. A few more seconds. Elara threw herself towards the altar, using her own body as a shield against the unnatural gale. She cupped her hands around the dying ember of the flame, protecting it from the wind. The heat was intense, searing her palms, but she didn't pull away. She fed it her own breath, her own will. Foolish child, Morwen's voice slithered through her mind. You think your fragile life can stand against my eternity? Look at them, your beloved dead. They are dust. You will be dust. I offer an end to decay. I offer power. Visions flooded her mind. Not of terror, but of temptation. She saw Blackwater Mend not as a fearful, misty hamlet, but as a thriving city, with her as its queen. She saw her grandfather, not as a shimmering ghost, but alive and well, smiling at her. She saw the power to reshape the world, to banish all loss, all pain. It's a lie, she gasped, her hands blistering, her tears evaporating in the heat. You only know how to destroy. The spark, nurtured by her defiance, began to grow. It caught the wick again, flaring into a small, steady flame. The wind lessened slightly. Morwen screamed in fury, a sound that shattered the windows of the houses facing the square. He surged forward, no longer testing the wards, but throwing his entire spectral weight against the barrier created by the last light. The air in the square crackled with energy. The sigils on all the warding lights in the village flared in unison, a network of power all connected to the central flame. You cannot win, he roared. Your faith is a flicker. My hatred is an ocean. He was right. Elara felt her strength waning. The heat from the candle was agony. Her belief, though firm, was new, untested. It was no match for a millennium of nurtured malice. The flame began to weaken once more. It was then that she saw the other spirits, the common dead, begin to move. They were not just echoes. They had their own will, their own love for this place. Led by the shimmering form of her grandfather, they drifted towards the square. They did not attack Morwen. They could not. Instead, they surrounded the altar. They gathered around Elara. One by one, they reached out their faint, translucent hands towards the flame of the last light. They had no heat to give, no physical substance. But they had memory. They had love. A soft, silver light began to emanate from them, a cool, gentle radiance that flowed into the faltering orange flame of the candle. The flame changed. It grew taller, brighter, its color shifting to a brilliant, incandescent white. It was no longer just a candle of tallow and herbs. It was a beacon fueled by remembrance, by the collective love of every soul who had ever called Blackwater Mend home. Morwen shrieked, the red light of his eyes dimming before this new, pure radiance. This was a power he could not comprehend, a magic he could not corrupt. You are forgotten. Elara cried out, her voice ringing with a power not entirely her own. Your hatred is a relic. You have no place here. The white light exploded outwards from the candle in a silent, concussive wave. It washed over the square, through the streets, into every corner of the village. The warding lights flared one last, brilliant time and then went out, their purpose fulfilled. The wave hit Morwen. His form contorted, the shadows that composed him unraveling like old thread. The red eyes widened in shock, then faded to grey, and then to nothing. With a final, fading wail that was more of a sigh, the spirit of Morwen the Vile dissolved. He was not banished. He was unmade. Erased from existence, his final curse broken not by fear, but by a love that even death could not extinguish. The wind died. The fog lifted, revealing a sky dusted with cold, clear stars. The dead ancestors, their forms now brighter and more peaceful, smiled at Elara before fading one by one, returning to their rest. Her grandfather was the last to go, his shimmering hand giving her a faint, cool touch on her cheek before he too was gone. Utterly exhausted, Elara slumped against the altar, cradling her burned hands. The last light, now a normal candle flame once more, continued to burn, its light small and warm in the vastness of the night. In the east, a sliver of grey appeared. Dawn was coming. The villagers emerged slowly, cautiously, from their homes. They saw Elara by the altar, the spent warding lights, and the peaceful, normal quiet of the morning. They saw the light in the sky. They knew, without being told, that something fundamental had changed. The curse was over. In the years that followed, Halloween in Blackwater Mend transformed. The grim vigil became a celebration, a true festival of remembrance. They still carved pumpkins, but the sigils were replaced with laughing and friendly faces. They lit bonfires and told stories, not of Morwen the Vile, for his name was willingly forgotten, but of the bravery of their ancestors and of the girl who had shielded the last light of Samhain. Elara, her hands always bearing the faint scars of that night, became the new elder. She never saw the world beyond the valley as foolish again, for she knew that some truths are too deep for books. Some magic exists in the space between memory and love, in the simple, profound act of keeping a light burning in the dark. And every year, as the leaves turned and the air grew crisp, she would feel not dread, but a quiet connection to the gentle dead, and a profound gratitude for the peace that had been so fiercely, and so finally, won. The veil was thin, but it was no longer a thing to be feared. It was a reminder that even in the deepest dark, a single, stubborn light could be enough.
If you feel a chill down your spine, don't worry. They're just standing behind you, listening with you. Thank you for daring to enter the world of fairy tales of Nim. We'll see you again next night, if you're still around.